No one noticed Jia Mintan at the gala. She was a ghost in a gold-filled room, without contacts, without alliances, without any reason for anyone in that Marina Bay ballroom to pay her any attention. She had gone to close a business deal, not to be seen, and the room had perfectly allowed her to do so. But someone did see her. A small, 7-year-old girl in a white dress, with tiny silver buttons, legs that didn't reach the floor, and eyes that reflected something no child should have to bear alone. She sat at the far end of the room, watching the crowd like old women watch funerals in silence, carefully, as if she already knew how the story ended. And then she moved, crossing the entire ballroom, past bodyguards, past her father's associates, past all the powerful and dangerous people in that room, stopping right in front of Jia Mintan, a woman she had never seen in her life. She looked up at Jia Min and whispered, "Can I sit with you?" In 30 minutes, that girl would reveal a secret so dangerous that it would lead Jia Min directly into the heart of a man's home, a man who controlled half the city from the shadows, a man whose name made people lower their voices, a man who didn't know the woman sleeping beside him every night was slowly killing him. One cup of coffee at a time. If you've ever wondered what happens when you mind your own business, but trouble finds you anyway, welcome. Like, share with someone who loves good stories, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming, because this one will take you somewhere you didn't expect. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Back to that cozy little corner where Jia Mintan stood alone, a drink in hand, thinking the hardest part of the night would be small talk. Jia Mintan hadn't come to Singapore to party. She had come to close an artisanal jewelry deal she'd been negotiating for 3 months via email with a boutique chain in Haji Lane, the kind of deal that could lift her small business from precarity to prosperity. She had a clear plan. Fly in, sign the contract, fly out. No drama, no fuss, nothing but work. The gala wasn't part of the original plan. It was Priya Sharma, her best friend and business partner, who called her at 4 p.m., her voice sounding like she'd just won the lottery. They'd received an invitation through one of their contacts in Singapore, a high-level charity ball, the kind of event where a handshake in the right place could open many doors. The email wouldn't even touch it. Jia Min stood by her hotel window and looked out at the Singapore streets for a full minute before saying yes. She wore a deep red dress, the only one she owned, and felt confident enough to wear square-shouldered, floor-length, the kind of dress that spoke before she did. She'd bought it with the money from the first deal she'd closed on her own, and every time she wore it, she remembered exactly how she'd felt that night. The feeling of buying something beautiful for the first time in her life without asking anyone for permission. The venue was stunning, with that menacing tranquility that truly expensive places always have. Chandeliers reflected light like frozen waterfalls. Men wore suits that had never seen a discount rack. Conversations unfolded in the 2 languages of money and power. 2 languages Jia Min understood, but didn't speak like a native. She'd been in rooms like this before, not many, but enough not to be dazzled, nor did she feel particularly comfortable. She knew no one, and no one knew her, and the canapés were frankly quite disappointing. She found a corner, her natural habitat, at events like this, grabbed a drink from a passing waiter, and began to observe. People watching was free entertainment, and Jia Min was very good at it. That's when she saw him. Julian Tan stood at the center of the room like a man who had never in his life wondered if he belonged anywhere. He wasn't the loudest person at the gala. He didn't need to be. People gravitated around him without seeming to realize they were doing it. Tall, serene, in a dark gray suit, with a face that revealed nothing. Not exactly cold, more like a door without a handle. Beside him was a beautiful woman, in a demanding sense, her hand resting on his arm, smiling at the right moments, leaning in with a rehearsed ease that seemed almost real. Jia Min watched them both, filed them under "not my business," and moved on. She returned to her drink, her small corner, the only job she'd assigned herself that night. Observe and cause no trouble. But trouble, as she was about to discover, didn't need her to seek it out. It had already come looking for her, and it was wearing a white dress with a row of tiny silver buttons. The next thing that caught her eye was sitting alone at a small table near the edge of the room. A little girl, no more than 7, in a white dress with a row of tiny silver buttons. Jia Min's eyes, trained to judge fabrics, immediately recognized it wasn't a mass-produced dress. The girl's legs dangled above the floor, and she watched the room with the quiet, indifferent gaze of someone who had seen too much for her age. Jia Min watched her for a moment. No one was looking at the girl, not the security guard scanning the room, not the woman on Julian Tan's arm, not Julian himself, engrossed in conversation with 2 older men. Then, the girl turned her head and looked directly at Jia Min. It was the kind of stare A 7-year-old shouldn't have, steady, assessing, as if making a decision. Jia Min held her gaze, unsure why. And after a long silence, the girl looked away first. Jia Min returned to her drink. She was halfway through a sip when she felt it, a small, deliberate tug on the fabric of her dress. She looked down. The girl stood beside her, hands carefully clasped in front of her. She had crossed the entire gala floor, past guards, past her father's associates, past all the important people in the room, and stopped there, right beside Jia Min Tan, a woman she had never seen in her life. The girl looked up and whispered, "Can I sit with you?" Jia Min blinked. "Where are your parents?" The girl glanced quickly at Julian Tan across the room, then back at Jia Min. "My father is busy." Jia Min looked around, expecting someone to rush over. No one moved. No one even bothered to glance in their direction. She pulled out the chair next to her. "Sit." The girl sat, smoothing her skirt over her knees with the poise of someone much older than 7. Then she studied Jia Min's face with undisguised curiosity. "You're not from Singapore," the girl said. "Very observant," Jia Min said. "I'm not. You came alone." "Also true." "Aren't you afraid of anything in this room?" Jia Min tilted her head. "What makes you say that?" "Because everyone else is," the girl said simply. "But you're just standing there in your corner, drinking your drink like it's a normal party." Jia Min laughed. The sound was warm and real, and a little too loud for their quiet corner. She didn't mind. "And what's your name, little observer?" "Nora." A small pause. "Nora Tan." Jia Min Tan hadn't come to Singapore to look for trouble, but something in the way the girl said her name, as if it carried a weight she'd never asked for, made Jia Min put down her drink and give Nora her full attention. "Jia Min Tan," she said. "Pleased to meet you, Nora Tan." Nora nodded as if introductions were merely a formality, and they both already knew this conversation was going somewhere important. For a few minutes, they sat in a surprisingly comfortable silence. Jia Min watched the room. Nora watched her father across the ballroom. That serene, untouchable man, with an expression Jia Min couldn't quite identify. Not exactly longing, it was more complicated than that. "Is that your father?" Jia Min asked softly. "Yes. He seems important." "He is." Another pause. "That's the problem." Jia Min looked at her. "What do you mean?" Nora didn't answer immediately. She watched the woman next to her father pour him another drink from a private bottle she had brought to the table. She watched as the woman smiled at Julian as he accepted the glass. Nora's small hands tightened slightly on her thighs. Then she turned to Jia Min. "Can I tell you something?" "You can tell me anything you want," Jia Min said cautiously. Nora looked at her with eyes too old for her face and spoke so softly, Jia Min had to lean in to hear her. "The woman next to my father puts something in his coffee every morning. I've seen her do it 3 times. The noise of the gala continued around them, the clinking of glasses, the rising and falling laughter, the music drifting from somewhere Jia Min couldn't see. And in their quiet corner, a 7-year-old girl had just placed something in Jia Min's hands that felt like a live wire. "Have you told your father?" Jia Min asked, keeping her voice steady. "No," Nora shook her head. "He won't believe me. He never believes anything about her. She's very good at smiling." The girl said it without bitterness. Just the truth. The kind of truth a child accepts after trying and failing. "I just wanted someone to know, so that if something bad ever happened to him, at least one person would know it was going to happen." Jia Min looked at this 7-year-old girl, carrying this burden alone, not asking to be rescued, not asking for anything, just needing to unload that weight somewhere, even for a moment, even with a stranger she might never see again. Before Jia Min could respond, Nora stood up, smoothed her dress, and said, "Thank you for letting me sit with me." Then she crossed the dance floor, sat back at her small table, folded her hands in her lap, and stared blankly ahead as if their conversation had never happened. Jia Min picked up her drink, put it down on the table, and picked it up again. She looked at Julian Tan across the room, accepting another drink from the woman beside him, smiling at something an associate had said, completely oblivious to everything. She looked at Nora sitting alone, watching her father with quiet, helpless eyes. Jia Min Tan had come to Singapore to mind her own business. She stared at her drink for a long time. Then she looked at Nora across the room, so small in a chair too big for her, her feet not reaching the floor, her hands carefully clasped in her lap, completely alone in a room full of people. And something in that image opened a door in Jia Min's mind that she had kept closed for a very long time. She saw herself at 7, sitting in an empty HDB kitchen in Sembawang, on a wooden chair with peeling paint, waiting for her mother to come home from the hospital. She had sat there all afternoon, She had sat there all night. She had sat there until a neighbor knocked on the door and looked at her with eyes she didn't understand then, but understood perfectly now. The eyes of an adult who knew something a child didn't, and didn't want to be the one to tell her. Her mother never came home. Jia-min sat alone in that kitchen many nights after that, before understanding that waiting didn't change the outcome. No one came. No one asked if she was okay. No one sat beside her and said, "I see you. I know you're carrying something. Let me help you." She had been Nora. Exactly Nora. And she knew with the certainty that only people who have been that child can have, that she couldn't leave tonight and pretend the conversation in that corner hadn't happened. She wasn't going to save Nora because she was a hero. She was going to save Nora because she had been Nora and no one had saved her. She pulled out her phone and called Priya. "Priya," she said when her friend answered, "how about we make a little detour before we fly home?" "What kind of detour?" Priya asked slowly. "I need to find out how to apply for a domestic helper job." Complete silence. "Jia-min?" "Yes, Jia-min Tan, the jewelry business owner, the same one. You want to apply for a housekeeper position?" "Domestic staff." "Yes. Have you been drinking, Jia-min? I'm going to need you to remove yourself from any conversation, person, or situation that led you to this moment, because we did not build this business from the ground up for you to go scrub someone's floors in Singapore." "No one said anything about scrubbing floors. That's literally what domestic helpers do." "Priya, would you lower your voice?" "I will not lower my voice." Jia-min held the phone away from her ear and looked across the room at Michelle Lim, pouring Julian Tan another drink with that beautiful, perfect, rehearsed smile. "Priya," Jia-min said quietly, "I'll explain everything tomorrow. Just do me a favor and look up domestic staff agencies in Singapore tonight. I hate you." Priya said, "You love me right now?" "Honestly, I do not." "Good night, Priya." "If you die," Priya said after a long silence, "I'm keeping the business." "Fair enough," Jia-min said. She hung up the phone and looked at Nora one last time across the room. The girl didn't turn around. She had said what she needed to say. She had moved on, but Jia-min Tan hadn't. The agency Priya found, despite her fierce objections and a 4-5-minute lecture on all the terrible decisions Jia-min had made in her life, was called Sterling Household Services. They specialized in placing high-level staff in Singapore's elite families, discreet, professional, with thorough background checks. Jia-min sat across from the agency coordinator the next morning in a neat downtown office and answered every question with the quiet confidence of a woman who had spent her adult life negotiating with difficult people in difficult rooms. She had done her homework the night before: how to present herself, how to turn her humble beginnings and complicated history into an asset rather than a liability. The coordinator looked at Jia-min's file, looked at Jia-min, then back at the file. Priya had used her contacts to polish Jia-min's digital footprint, giving her just enough cover to slip past the stricter filters. When the coordinator pointed out her lack of formal domestic history, Jia-min responded politely, "I've managed luxury properties overseas. I just prefer a more hands-on role now." And it was true. She had supported herself since she was 15. She knew how to cook because no one had cooked for her. She knew how to clean because no one had cleaned for her. She knew how to manage because if she didn't manage her own life, no one else would. All her skills came from having no one. She didn't say that part aloud. She let her confidence speak for her. "The household you're being considered for has very specific requirements," the coordinator said. "The employer," as she paused, choosing her words a bit particular. "I work well with particular people," Jia-min said. "In fact, I prefer them." The coordinator studied her for a long moment. Jia-min returned the smile with the patience of someone who had closed deals with clients who didn't want to close. 3 days later, she got the call. She had been accepted into the Tan family's residence. She called Priya immediately. "I got it," she said. Silence. Then, "Jia-min, I need you to know I'm your best friend, and I love you, and I'm also seriously considering reporting you missing because you've clearly been kidnapped and replaced by a crazy person." "Priya, do you know whose house that is?" "I have an idea." "An idea, Jia-min, that man isn't Priya," lowered her voice to an angry whisper, "that man isn't a normal person. That isn't a normal house. You can't just walk in there with your chest out and your strategy like you're closing a jewelry deal." "Watch me," Jia-min said. Silence again, longer than the first. "If you die," Priya said at last, "I'm keeping the business." "You already said that." It bears repeating. The Tan residence was exactly what Jia-min expected, and somehow even more than she was prepared to see. Just passing through the iron gate took 30 seconds. The gardens seemed to have their own private staff. The main building was a classic limestone bungalow in a prestigious district, the kind of architecture that conveyed effortless power, clean lines, understated luxury, the kind of place that evoked old money, even if the money wasn't old at all. Jia-min arrived with 3 other new staff members. They were escorted to the staff quarters. She was handed a uniform, a sleek navy outfit, which she quietly noted was very well tailored, and given instructions by MDM, Heng. MDM. Heng was the head housekeeper, a sharp-eyed woman who spoke in short sentences and seemed like she'd never voluntarily smiled in her life. "You will learn the house schedule over the first week," MDM, Heng said, striding quickly through the halls with Jia-min beside her. "You will not speak unless spoken to by members of the household. You will not make eye contact with Mr. Tan unless he addresses you directly. You will never go to the 3rd floor. Me DM. Heng," a small voice said. They both turned. Nora Tan stood in the hallway in her school uniform, backpack on, clearly just home. She looked at Jia-min with an expression that revealed nothing, no surprise, no recognition, nothing at all. Jia-min met her gaze with the same blankness. "Miss Nora, Nadem," Heng said, her demeanor shifting to an almost warm one. "You've come home early." "Training was cancelled," Nora said, not taking her eyes off Jia-min. "Is she new?" "Yes, this is Jia-min. She joined today." Nora studied Jia-min for another second, intently, then looked away. "Okay," she said simply, and walked away down the hall towards the stairs. Jia-min watched her go. Just before reaching the staircase, Nora turned her head slightly, not enough for Mediem, Heng to notice, and her eyes met Jia-min's once more, a brief, deliberate look. Then, she was gone. "Message received," Jia-min thought. "We don't know each other." Understood. That first night, Jia-min lay in her small basement room with a tiny window overlooking the courtyard, listening to footsteps upstairs, someone moving through the downstairs hall at 2 a.m. She couldn't sleep. She called Priya and whispered, "This house breathes at night, Priya. I swear. Come home," Priya said. "Not yet," Jia-min said, and lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the house breathe and wondering what she had gotten herself into. Jia-min's first week at the Tan residence taught her 3 things. The first was that Julian Tan ran his house the same way he ran everything else, with absolute power and silence. He rarely appeared, but was always present. When he passed through a room, the temperature seemed to change. Staff straightened without being told. Conversations stopped. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. Some mornings, Jia-min would hear his footsteps downstairs, steady, unhurried, and the entire hall would fall silent, as if the house itself held its breath. Once, she was dusting the library shelves when he walked past the door, without stopping, without looking, without saying a single word. And she still knew he was there, because the air in the room felt heavier than half a second before, just before his footsteps faded. It was the kind of power that didn't need performance. It simply existed, like gravity. The second thing Jia-min learned was that Michelle Lim was very, very good at being liked. She was warm with the staff, generous with compliments, quick to smile, and quick to laugh. Jia-min observed her as she observed difficult business partners with a pleasant expression and attention that never relaxed for a second. She noticed that Michelle's warmth and cordiality never reached her eyes when she thought no one was watching. There was one small moment when Michelle was alone in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil. Her face was completely expressionless, staring blankly into space, looking like someone calculating who wasn't resting. Then a staff member entered, and the smile instantly returned soft, perfect, without a trace of artifice. Jia-min saw it and filed it away. She also noticed that Michelle controlled Julian's schedule, his meals, and his coffee, always his coffee. Every morning, Michelle brewed it herself, brought it herself, placed it in front of him herself, with a perfectly timed smile and a lightly placed touch on his shoulder. No one else could approach Julian Tan's morning coffee. That was Michelle's territory, and she guarded it with a care. Jia-min recognized as something more than love. It seemed more like control. The third thing Jia-min learned was that Nora Tan, for a 7-year-old, had extraordinary self-control. They crossed paths several times a day in the hallways, at meals, in the garden. Nora never acknowledged Jia-min beyond the normal boundaries of a child interacting with staff. No lingering looks, no secret smiles, nothing that would draw attention. But one afternoon, as Jia-min was reorganizing the library, a room she had deliberately requested to be assigned to because it had a clear view of the main living area where Julian took his afternoon coffee, she felt a small presence beside her. She didn't look down. She continued stacking books. "There's a loose brick behind the east garden bench," Nora said lightly, her voice perfectly normal, as if commenting on the weather. "If anything needs to be kept safe." Then she walked out of the library. Jia-min stared at the bookshelf for a moment. Then she allowed herself a small smile. She had thought this child was just a frightened girl, carrying too heavy a secret. She was beginning to understand that Nora Tan was much more complicated than that. And then there was the matter of the drawings. Jia-min discovered them while tidying Nora's room as part of the weekly routine. Under the girl's pillow, carefully hidden, was a stack of crayon drawings. Jia-min shouldn't have looked, she knew, but the top sheet was already peeking out, and her eyes saw it before she could decide. All the drawings showed the same theme: a house, 2 people inside, a tall adult and a small child, never a third person. In each drawing there were only 2. Jia-min stood there, holding the stack, and felt a tightness in her chest she wasn't prepared for. The girl wasn't drawing the family she wanted. She was drawing the family she believed was real. And in Nora Tan's version of the world, only 2 people belonged in that house: the child and her father. No one else. Jia-min put the stack back exactly where it was, under the pillow. She smoothed the pillowcase and left the room, not touching anything else. Jia-min was 2 weeks into her time at the house when she began gathering real evidence. She had maneuvered herself into being responsible for setting up the coffee service area 3 times a week, a position she had devised to observe Michelle's routine from the shadows, with a careful, slow patience that, if Priya knew about it, would make her simultaneously proud and horrified. And she began to track Michelle's patterns. The private cabinet in Michelle's dressing room, the kind that required its own key, a key, Michelle never let out of her sight, the small, unlabeled vial that appeared on the coffee tray some mornings and not others. Jia-min photographed what she could. She stored everything behind the loose brick in the east garden that Nora had shown her. She did it all with the silent precision of someone who understood that a single mistake in that house didn't mean being fired. It meant something much worse. What she hadn't anticipated was Julian Tan himself. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Jia-min was moving through the main hallway, arms full of clean linen, when she turned a corner and collided directly with him, not figuratively, but literally. The sheets flew in one direction. She lost her balance and would have fallen hard if a hand hadn't gripped her arm with a quickness that was frankly surprising for a man who had been still a second earlier. The next thing she knew, she was standing, her arm held, her face mere inches from Julian Tan's. Up close, he looked more human than from across the ballroom. There was weariness around his eyes. His composure was something he worked to conceal. He looked at her with something not exactly surprise, more like a quiet recalibration. "I'm sorry," Jia-min said immediately, stepping back and bending to pick up the scattered blankets. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "Neither was I," he said. His voice was lower than she expected. She kept her gaze on the blankets and a professionally neutral expression. She was painfully aware she was supposed to be invisible. "You're new," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. 2 weeks." A pause. "You're not from Singapore?" She almost laughed. His daughter had said the exact same thing. "No, sir. From Sembawang." He said nothing further. She gathered the last sheets, gave a small professional nod, and continued down the hall. She didn't look back, but she felt his gaze on her until she turned the corner. After that day, something changed, not dramatically, not obviously, not in a way she could pinpoint and name, but Jia-min began to feel Julian's presence in the places she worked. In the library as she dusted shelves, in the hallway as she changed flowers, in the dining room as she cleared the table. He didn't speak, didn't look directly at her, but he was there. Then he would disappear, then reappear. Jia-min wasn't sure if she was imagining it. She told herself she was. She told herself the house wasn't that big, and it was normal to run into someone by chance. She told herself many reasonable things, but none of them quite convinced her. That night in her room she called Priya. "I ran into him today," she told her. "Who?" Silence. "Oh no, Priya, no, nothing happened." It was 30 seconds. She was quiet for a moment. "He caught me before I fell." Priya's voice was carefully controlled. "Jia-min, I'm not saying anything." "Okay, I'm just sitting here being your best friend and not saying anything about the fact that you went there to save a man, and now he catches you when you fall." "Priya, I'm going to hang up." Very romantic. She ended the call, but lay there, staring at the ceiling for a long time. And she wasn't thinking about evidence, loose bricks, or unlabeled vials. She was thinking about those few inches of distance in the hallway and the hand that had held her arm before she hit the floor. The one thing Jia Min hadn't factored into any of her calculations was an assassination attempt. It was a Wednesday afternoon. She was in the East Garden, ostensibly pruning shrubs, but actually watching the back gate where a delivery was scheduled, when she heard it. Not a loud noise, but more a controlled chaos coming from the garage. Then a shout, followed by a sound that needed no translation in any language. A gunshot. Somewhere on the second floor, Nora had been singing. Jia Min had heard that singing when she entered the garden, small, clear, and innocent, as only children sing when they think no one is listening. The singing stopped at that instant. The first shot rang out. The silence that followed was louder than the shot. The first shot didn't come from the front. With professionals, it never did. Jia Min was moving through the open space between the garage and the east wing when the side door blew inward with a sound less like an explosion and more like controlled certainty. 6 men, tactical gear, deliberate. They had done this before and knew exactly how much time they had before the house's internal security responded. What they hadn't accounted for was the woman who stood between them and the target. 2 of Julian's guards fell quickly. One was shot in the shoulder. The other dropped to the ground before he could draw his weapon. Julian was forced back against the wall, 1 against 3, holding his ground like a truly dangerous man does, but the numbers simply weren't right. Jia Min assessed all of this in about 1 second. Then she moved out of the blind spot, the angle none of the 3 were watching, because why would they watch a domestic helper? And she struck the nearest one with all her strength. Without warning, without hesitation. She had grown up in places that taught her whoever announced themselves first lost, and she had never forgotten that lesson. Her elbow connected with the side of his neck, and he dropped sideways. And she lunged for the next man before the first hit the ground. The second was larger and turned quickly. He grabbed her wrist, and she used his grip and his momentum and that half-second of confidence he drew from his size against him, twisting in the direction he didn't expect, and introducing his face to the side of the bungalow wall with enough force to leave a mark on both. And he fell. The third had a knife. Jia Min picked up the pruning shears. What happened next lasted about 40 seconds, and it wasn't the kind of thing you'd see in a staged fight scene. It was ugly, close, and brutally effective. The kind of fighting that didn't come from training, but from years of knowing exactly how much damage the human body can take and exactly where it cannot. She took a cut to her arm and paid it no mind. She gave back much more than she received. By the time Julian's internal security finally flooded the garden, it was over. Jia Min stood in the middle of it all, pruning shears in hand, breathing steadily, the cut on her arm bleeding silently through the sleeve of her uniform. She looked up at a second-story window. Nora was there, her small face behind the curtain, one hand clutching the fabric, eyes wide. Jia Min raised her hand slightly, just a small gesture. "It's okay." Nora looked away, but loosened her grip on the curtain a bit. Jia Min looked at the damage around her, looked at the pruning shears in her hand, and put them down. Then she looked at Julian Tan. He was watching her with an expression that had completely abandoned any pretense of composure. It wasn't fear, or exactly confusion, but something trying to find a category for what he had just witnessed, and realizing none of the available categories were large enough. Jia Min adjusted her uniform with her uninjured hand. "Should I finish with the East Wing linen, or is that no longer a priority?" she asked. Silence. Ben Chu, the head of security, made a sound that might have been a laugh, but quickly turned into a cough. Julian kept watching her for a long time. Then he said in a very quiet voice, "Come inside." His office was the kind of room that told you everything about a man without him having to open his mouth. Clean lines, nothing superfluous. Every object in the space had earned its place. The books had actually been read. They weren't the kind placed for pretty covers. The desk had seen real work, an old ink stain in one corner of the wood, a faint coffee ring no one had bothered to erase. There was no display of power, just the quiet, serene confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything to the room he was in. Jia Min stood near the door while he spoke briefly with Ben Chu in low tones she couldn't understand. She waited with the patience of a woman who had spent her life in rooms where she had to let men finish talking before she was allowed to speak. It had never bothered her. Patience was just a strategy with better posture. When the security team left and the door closed, Julian turned and looked directly at her for the first time since the garden. He crossed the room, not to his desk, but to her. He stopped in front of her and looked at her arm, the sleeve stained with blood, a cut longer than the uniform could hide. His expression was controlled, but not entirely. He reached out, and carefully rolled up her sleeve. Jiamin let him. She watched his face as he assessed the wound. "Sit," he told her. "It's fine." He looked at her, simply looked at her. Jiamin sat. He pulled a chair from behind the desk and sat directly opposite her, closer than professional distance demanded. Close enough for her to be aware of how close he was, and opened a first aid kit from a desk drawer with the ease of someone who had treated injuries before and had his own opinions on how they should be treated. He worked in silence. His hands were steady, careful, and thorough. The kind of thoroughness that cared about doing it right, not just getting it done. Jiamin watched the top of his head bent over her arm and maintained a neutral expression, with the concentrated effort of someone performing considerable internal work. He cleaned the cut, slowly, with precision. He applied antiseptic without warning, and she didn't flinch. He looked up quickly when she didn't react, then went back to work, without saying anything. But she saw the corner of his lips twitch slightly. At one point, he pressed the wound harder than she expected, and she didn't wince. He looked up. Something moved in his eyes, quick, deep, indescribable. Then, he finished the job. When he was done, he didn't release her arm immediately. He held it, not tightly, not demandingly, just holding it like someone holds something they aren't quite ready to let go of. He looked at what he had done, then he looked up. So close, so quiet. "You took a knife," he said. "The knife was already moving," Jiamin said. "I just redirected it." "That distinction doesn't change what it means," he said. Jiamin said nothing. His gaze moved over her face with the precision she had noticed before. The way he looked at things he was trying to understand, as if she were a problem his usual frameworks couldn't solve, was more interesting than irritating. "Who are you, Jiamin-tan?" he asked quietly. "A businesswoman," she replied. "Who grew up in a complicated place." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now," she said. He held her gaze for another instant, then slowly released her arm and leaned back. He had regained professional distance, not coldness, just awareness, like a decision made in real time. "You'll have the rest of the day off," he said. "Don't use that arm." "I have linen," she said. Jiamin. Her name in his mouth wasn't accompanied by miss. It sounded as it always did, like something with weight. "Rest," he said. She stood up, pulled down her sleeve, and looked at him one last time. He was already looking at her. She left the room, took exactly 4 steps down the hall before stopping, tilting her head to the ceiling and having a very serious internal conversation with herself about the current situation and what she would and wouldn't do about it. The conversation wasn't entirely satisfying. He found her in the garden that night, not by chance or passing by. He came on purpose. She knew it from the way he approached her, deliberate from the way he stopped beside her, deliberate from the way he looked at her, as if he had decided something before coming out. She was sitting on the stone bench near the east wall. The garden was quiet around them. Singapore was doing something with the last light of day that made everything seem temporarily still. He sat beside her, not so close as to be inappropriate, but close enough for her to be aware of how close he was. No one spoke for a while. The silence was pleasant, the kind of silence that had been created between them from a hallway and a cut in hand softer than they had any right to be. Then he reached out without asking, and carefully took her injured arm. He looked at the bandage. Something at the edge had shifted. A full day of work had loosened it. He adjusted it with slow precision, with exact, unhurried fingers, the same hands that had bandaged her that morning in his office. He didn't release her arm as soon as he finished. He stared at the bandage for an instant, then looked at her and said, "I don't do this." She looked at him, her arm still in his hand. "I don't sit in gardens," he said. "I don't." He paused, then started again with the careful precision of a man who had thought hard about exactly what he wanted to say and realized words didn't always obey. "I don't notice people. Not like this. I notice threats. I notice problems. I notice things that need to be solved." A pause. His thumb moved slightly on her arm. Just slightly. "I notice you." The garden was very quiet. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly, clearly, as if he needed her to know before she reacted. "I'm not. This isn't a request. I just needed to say it aloud to someone who should know." He looked directly at her. "You should know." Jiamin looked at him. At this man who had just said something that had clearly cost him a great deal and now sat with the quiet posture of someone who had put something down and wasn't going to pick it up again. The last light kept changing around them, casting long shadows on the stone and brick and the hand that still held her arm. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The silence between them said everything. Then Jiamin stood up first. He released her arm slowly, just as he had that morning in his office. as if letting her go was a decision he was making, not a natural act. She looked at him. He looked up, and she said in a low voice, almost more to herself than to him, "For what it's worth, I notice you too. I wish I didn't." Then she walked away. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen him still sitting there, staring into the space where she had just been, with the expression of a man who had been handed something he didn't know what to do with, but knew with absolute certainty that he didn't want to give back. Julian Tan sat alone in his garden for a long time, until the last light disappeared completely, and Singapore transitioned from dusk to something darker and quieter, until the stone bench was just a bench, and the garden was just a garden, and his words were just words. But they weren't just words, and he knew it, and that more than anything else that had happened that day, even 6 gunmen and 40 seconds of violence, and a domestic helper with pruning shears, was what kept him awake that night. The results came 4 days later. Priya's contact, a friend of someone in Singapore's pharmaceutical research world, had analyzed the sample and sent a report that Jia Min read twice. Then she put down her phone and stared at her basement room wall for a long time. The compound in Michelle's vial didn't kill quickly. It was slow, the kind designed to mimic a gradual decline in health over months, even years, impossible to detect without specialized testing, sophisticated enough that only someone with significant resources could have acquired it. Jia Min sat with that information all day. She sat with it and thought of Nora watching her father drink his coffee every morning. She thought of a 7-year-old girl who had calculated her father would never believe her and had therefore accepted that something terrible would one day happen, and decided that at least one person should know what was going to happen. She thought of how unbearable it must be to be that child. Then she went to find Julian. She requested a private meeting through MDM. Heng, which made the housekeeper look at her with such surprise that Jia Min almost completely lost her composure. A private request from a staff member was clearly not something that happened often in the Tan household. He received her in his office. He was standing when she entered, without his jacket, working. It was the first time she had seen him look almost accessible. He watched her with that familiar, inscrutable attention. Jia Min placed the materials on his desk, the photos, the lab results, the dates and times she had recorded over 3 weeks. She presented it as she had presented business proposals all her life, clearly, thoroughly, and without drama. Then she stepped back and waited. He read in silence. Page after page, Jia Min watched his face, which remained impassive for most of the time, that closed-door expression that let nothing escape. Then he reached the lab results, read them once, read them again. The quality of the silence in the room changed. "How long have you known?" he asked without looking up. "Since the night of the ball," she replied. "I needed to be sure before telling you." Now he looked up. "You've been here 3 weeks." "Yes." "You applied for a job in this house 3 weeks ago." A pause. "Yes." His eyes moved over her face with the precision of someone taking her apart piece by piece. "You didn't come here as domestic help," he said. It wasn't a question. Jia Min knew this moment would come. She had prepared for it. She met his gaze and said, "No, I didn't come as domestic help." "Then why did you come?" Jia Min thought of Nora at the gala. The white dress, the silver buttons, her feet not reaching the floor, the weight in those small eyes. "Your daughter told me at the gala," she said. "She wasn't asking for help, she just needed someone to know. But I couldn't ignore it." The room was very quiet. Julian put the papers down slowly, stared at them for a long time. Then he looked at Jia Min with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Something that had slipped through the sealed door into a much less guarded place. "Nora told a stranger," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "She told me she tried to tell you," Jia Min said cautiously, "that you wouldn't believe her." Something flashed across his face, sharp and brief. Jia Min didn't look away. She was right. "I wouldn't have," he said, the confession seeming to cost him something. He remained silent for a long time, then straightened up. The serene expression returned, but now it was different. It rested over something living and hurting inside him. "You'll have to leave the estate tonight for your own safety. What happens next won't be," he paused, "suitable for someone not involved." "I understand," Jia Min said. She was almost at the door when he said, "Miss Tan." She turned around. "Thank you," he said. Simple, direct, as a man speaks when he believes every syllable. Jia Min nodded once and left. She packed in an hour. Surprisingly, 3 weeks could fit into a suitcase so quickly when working efficiently. The uniform was neatly folded and left on the bed. She put a few personal items in her bag, Her phone, her charger, the small notebook she had used for notes, now empty because everything was on Julian Tan's desk. She was heading down the staff corridor towards the exit when she heard small, quick footsteps behind her. She turned around. Nora, in her pajamas, hair loose, stood in the hallway, looking at the bag Jia-min carried in her hand, with an expression she was trying hard to control and losing by the second. This wasn't the Nora from the gala. This wasn't the Nora who had passed Jia-min in the hallways for 3 weeks without blinking. This wasn't the strategic, serene child, with eyes too old for her face, who had left coded messages about a loose brick in the garden. This was just a little girl watching someone she cared about pack and leave. "Are you leaving?" Nora said. "Yes, sweetheart," Jia-min replied. At those words, something broke in Nora's face. Just a little, just enough, because sweetheart wasn't a word staff used for the boss's daughter. It was a word people used when they cared about someone. And Nora noticed the difference immediately. And that difference almost broke her. "Because of what you found out?" Nora asked. "Because my job here is finished." But Nora stopped, started again. "It has to finish." Jia-min knelt to the girl's height. Nora looked at her with eyes fighting to stay dry. "You did something incredibly brave," Jia-min said softly. "You saved your father's life, Nora." "You did. We did it together," Nora said vehemently and immediately. Jia-min felt that sentence in her chest like something physical. She opened her arms. Nora came to her and hugged her tightly, with a strength totally disproportionate to her size. Arms entwined, face pressed against Jia-min's shoulder, she held on. Children hold on when they understand that letting go makes it real. Jia-min hugged her back, unhurried, not gently pulling away. She let Nora hold on for as long as she needed. When Nora finally stepped back, her eyes were shining, but her chin was up. She smoothed the front of her pajamas, regaining something akin to her usual composure. She was 7 and heartbroken, in a way that was unbearable to watch. "Will you call me?" Nora asked. "Yes," Jia-min said, without hesitation. "Promise?" "Nora-tan." "I promise." Nora nodded once, accepting it, then looked at Jia-min seriously and said, "You should know my father walked into 8 rooms you were working in this week. You counted?" Jia-min blinked. 8, Nora confirmed. "Just so you know." Then she turned and walked back to her room, chin still up, shoulders very straight. And Jia-min stood in the hallway with her bag in hand, feeling 8 different things at once. She heard a sound and looked up. Julian was at the other end of the hallway. He had clearly been there for part of the conversation. He looked at her from a distance, serene, controlled. Then he watched Nora's back as she walked away with an expression Jia-min had never seen on his face before. Soft, broken and proud all at once. Then he looked back at Jia-min, said nothing. She said nothing either. She walked out the door. Outside the gate, it was raining in Singapore. She didn't have an umbrella. She took 5 steps before she heard the gate open behind her. It wasn't Julian. It was Ben Chu, holding an umbrella, stepping out and offering it. "For Mr. Tan," Ben said. After a moment of silence, he added, "The rain isn't stopping tonight." Jia-min took the umbrella, looked up at the second-story office window. The light was still on. A figure stood behind the curtain. She opened the umbrella, walked out into the rain, and walked away without looking back. But she held the umbrella tighter than necessary. He didn't sleep that night. Jia-min had left the house 2 hours earlier. The house was quiet, as houses often are after something important has happened. It wasn't exactly empty, just quieter. Julian sat in his office with the documents spread across his desk, the photos, the lab results, the dates and times written in Jia-min's careful hand over 3 weeks. He had read them once, while she showed them to him. He read them again after she left. Then, a third time. Not because he didn't believe her, but because he was giving himself time to feel what he needed to feel before doing what he had to do. For 3 years, he stared at the lab results. The compound name, the timeline, 4 months. He calculated silently, as he calculated everything. 4 months of mornings, 4 months of coffee accepted from hands he fully trusted. He thought of how far it would have gone if Jia-min hadn't come. How many more months before the damage was irreversible? Before doctors began looking for explanations, Michel had already prepared. He would have been sick, then sicker, then relying on the woman beside him to take care of everything while he couldn't, handing over everything he had built, piece by piece, because he was too weak to keep it. And she was there, and he loved her. That was the plan. He sat with that thought for a long time. Then he thought of Nora. He had seen it. He could admit it now. In the quiet of his office, with no one watching. He had seen his daughter pull away from Michel over the first year. The way Nora fell silent when Michel entered her room. The way she stopped bringing her drawings to the table when Michel sat there. The way she chose the farthest corner and watched with those old eyes, cautious instead of participating. He told himself it was an adjustment, that children needed time, that she hadn't been alone with him too long, and sharing his attention felt threatening to her. He had been patient about it, as he was with everything, quietly, deliberately, giving it space to resolve itself. What he hadn't told anyone was that the proposal had been close, very close. He had looked at Michel Lim and seen someone charming, stable, present, but he had been waiting for one thing, not a feeling, or a moment, or the right restaurant, or the right night. He had been waiting for Nora to choose Michel, because Nora's instincts were never wrong, because Nora saw things adults took years to understand, because if anything ever happened to him, and in his world, something always could, he needed to know that the woman he left his daughter with had been chosen by his daughter first. Nora had never chosen Michel, and he had kept waiting. He kept telling himself to give it more time, just a little more time. Nora would adjust. Children adjust. And Michel, who had been patient for 3 years and had misinterpreted his caution as hesitation, his waiting as rejection, had decided 4 months ago that she wasn't going to wait any longer. She didn't know she had already won. She had poisoned a man who was about to say yes. Julian stared at the papers for a long time. Then he made a brief, quiet call, 3 sentences. He hung up, put down the phone, and sat in silence for another hour. At midnight, he stood up, adjusted his jacket, and walked down the hall to her room. He knocked once, a pause, movement. The door opened. Michel stood in the doorway in a robe, her hair loose. She looked at him with the warmth she always offered him, real in its expression, calculated in its structure. 3 years of mornings and nights, conversations and private intimacy, a shared life. He had looked at that warmth and believed it completely. Now he looked at it and felt nothing but exhaustion. "Come with me," he told her. She followed him to his office without asking why. She sat in front of his desk, with the naturalness of someone who had sat there many times before, comfortable, holding nothing back. She had no reason to be otherwise. Then she saw the documents. Her eyes scanned them. First the photo her hand, the vial, the coffee tray, the dates and times she recognized because she had been there through all of it. Then the lab results. Then Jia Min's handwriting, 3 weeks of careful observation. Julian watched Michel's face as she read. He watched the warmth transform into something else. She remained calm because she always was. That was one of the things he had admired in her. But beneath that composure, something changed. The confidence of a woman who had walked in believing she could handle anything was confronted with the reality of documents that left nothing to handle. She looked up. What lay beneath wasn't guilt, it was irritation. The irritation of a 3-year plan ruined by a 7-year-old and a girl from Sembawang who had come to Singapore to sell jewelry. Julian stood by the window, his back to her. Singapore, outside the city, continued its indifferent midnight bustle, while in this room, its own private ending played out. "Tell me why," he said. "Not what you did, not how you could. Just tell me why." The simplest question, the one that gave her a chance to say something real for the first time since she had entered his life. The room was very quiet. She didn't speak. Julian waited. He was patient when he had to be. He had learned it early and thoroughly. Still, she said nothing. He turned from the window and looked at her across the room. "You were taking too long," she said, her voice simple, flat and quiet, like someone who no longer had reason to act. "I spent 3 years, I positioned myself, I did everything correctly, and you kept waiting and waiting, and I didn't know what you were waiting for. And I thought," she paused, "I thought you were never going to choose me, that you were keeping me close without intention, that I was going to lose everything I had worked for. So I decided to make sure that even if you didn't choose me, you would still need me." Julian said nothing. He stared across the room at this woman who had built an entire plan on a mistaken assumption from the very beginning. "I was going to propose to you," he said softly. Michel looked up. Something flashed across her face, sharp, immediate, and completely real. The first real thing he had seen in her all night wasn't guilt or regret. It was the expression of someone receiving information 4 months too late to change anything. "I was waiting for Nora," Julian said. "I needed her to choose you first, because my daughter comes above everything, above organization, above what I want, above anything. If anything ever happened to me, I needed to know she would be safe with you." He looked directly at Michel. "I kept waiting. I kept giving it time. I was 2 steps away from saying yes." The room fell completely silent. "She never chose me. Michelle whispered, almost to herself. No, Julian said. She didn't. I tried. Not hard enough, he said. Simple, not cruel, just true. Nora isn't hard to love. She never has been. She just needed someone to choose her first before choosing him. You were always waiting for her to come to you. She was always waiting for you to come to her. A pause. No one came. Michelle stared at him for a long moment as the full weight of it dropped. 3 years and 4 months. A plan built on a mistaken assumption. A proposal that had been close. A child who just needed to be chosen first. All lost for nothing. You can go now, Julian said, his voice light and perfectly calm. Without anger, without pretense. Just the absolute firmness of a man who had made a decision even before knocking on her door, and who had come himself, instead of sending someone else, because he had once loved her. And she deserved to hear the truth directly from him, even if the truth came too late for either of them to do anything about it. The door behind her was now open. 2 of Ben's men waited there. Michelle looked at them, then back at Julian by the window, his body already half-turned. She understood what it meant to leave that night. No negotiations, no scenes, no versions that ended differently. She stood up slowly, smoothed her robe, and regained her composure one last time. Not for him, not for the situation, just because it was the last thing she had left that still belonged entirely to her. She looked at him once more. He turned to the window. She left. The door closed. Julian Tan stood alone by the office window, Singapore outside, the papers on the desk behind him, the stillness of a house that had just become smaller, cleaner, and emptier, all at the same time. And when Heng brought coffee at 7 a.m. and placed it beside him with her usual efficiency and silence, he took it and drank, and for the first time in 4 months, it tasted only of coffee. The airport was Nora's idea. Jiamin knew it at 6 a.m. when Heng knocked on her hotel room door, which was alarming enough in itself, and announced, with the expression of a woman delivering news she didn't expect to receive, that there was a car waiting downstairs in the lobby. A car? Jiamin said. Yes, sent by Mr. Tan Nudam, Heng said. Miss Nora requested it. A pause, the housekeeper's expression changing almost imperceptibly. She was quite insistent. Jia Min stared at the ceiling. Then she went to get dressed. In the car was Nora, in a coat over her school uniform, entirely prepared to be late for school and clearly perfectly at peace with that decision. And Julian, in the front seat, turned to look at Jia Min as she got in, with an expression that said he was there against his better judgment, and solely because a 7-year-old had given him no other viable option. She wanted to come, he said. I heard, Jia Min said. I want to come, Nora corrected from Jia Min's side, sliding her small hand into Jia Min's. No preamble. There's a difference. The drive to Changi Airport lasted 40 minutes. Nora talked for 38 of them about school, about a girl named Hazel who annoyed her for detailed and specific reasons, about a book she was reading, about whether Jia Min had ever been to Perth because she heard it was beautiful and Jia Min should go someday. Nora held Jia Min's hand the entire way and occasionally paused mid-sentence and squeezed Jia Min's fingers, then continued talking. Julian sat in front and spoke very little, but Jia Min caught him twice looking at them in the rearview mirror. He didn't look away when she caught him. At the airport, he walked with them to the departure area, as far as he could go. Around them, Singapore moved at its efficient morning pace. Flights announced, trolleys rolling, people greeting and saying goodbye, in the infinite loop of airports. Nora had been fine in the car. She had been fine walking through the terminal. She had been very busy being fine. She stopped being fine about 4 meters from the boarding gate. At first, it was subtle. Her steps slowed. Her hand tightened around Jia Min's. Then she stopped walking entirely. Jia Min stopped with her. Julian stopped a step behind. Nora looked at the gate, looked at Jia Min, looked at the gate again. I don't want you to go, she said. No preamble, no layer of composure to wrap around it. Just the raw truth of a child who had run out of energy to control her own feelings. Jia Min knelt. I know, sweetheart. Then why are you going? Because I have to. For now. For now, Nora repeated, weighing the meaning of those 2 words. For now, Jia Min confirmed. Nora stared at her for a long moment, then stepped forward, wrapped both arms around Jia Min's waist, and pressed her face into her coat. And this time, she didn't try to maintain composure at all. Her shoulders shook once, just once. Then she held on tight. Jia Min hugged her back. She gently pulled Nora away, looked directly into her eyes. "I'll call you tonight as soon as I land." "You promised," Nora said. "I promised." Nora wiped her face with the back of her hand and straightened up. And that extraordinary composure slowly reassembled itself before Jiamin's eyes. "Okay," she said softly. Jiamin stood up and looked at Julian. He looked at her, jaw tight, hands in his pockets, struggling to maintain his own composure. And Jiamin could see exactly what he was fighting against. He looked like a man with something to say, but who had decided not to say it because he had already said it once in the garden and she hadn't responded. And he wasn't the kind of man who repeated himself. "Thank you," she said, "for the car." "Thank Nora," he said. His voice was quiet. His eyes were not. Jiamin nodded, picked up her suitcase, and headed for the gate. "Jiamin." She turned around. It was the second time he had said her name without a miss. It struck her differently than she expected. He looked at her across the space between them. Around them, Singapore buzzed and hurried, and a flight to Sembawang announced final boarding. "Come back," he said softly, simply. It wasn't exactly a request or a command, but something in between, something entirely his own. Jiamin looked at him for a long moment, then turned and walked through the gate. She didn't allow herself to look back, but she was smiling. She called Nora at 11 p.m. Sembawang time, which was 11 p.m. Singapore time, meaning Nora had stayed up waiting, something Nora denied with unconvincing determination. "I wasn't waiting," Nora said. "Of course not," Jiamin said. "You were just awake at 11 on a weeknight." "I'm a night owl," Nora said. "I might have set an alarm," Jiamin admitted. Nora laughed a warm, genuine laugh, filling her small Sembawang apartment with a sound that seemed to belong somewhere else. "How's your father?" A small pause. "He ate dinner alone," Nora said. "Sometimes he does, but tonight he was looking at his phone a lot." "Probably work," Jiamin said. "Probably," Nora said in a tone that made it clear she didn't believe it for a second. They talked for an hour about Sembawang, which Nora had questions about, specific, researched questions that suggested she had spent part of the day doing her own research on Singaporean geography. About school and the current situation with Hazel, who had apparently done something unforgivable involving a shared desk and a box of crayons. Nora considered private property and refused to debate. About jewelry. Nora wanted to know how the business worked, and Jiamin explained, and Nora listened with the concentrated attention of someone storing information for later use. Before hanging up, Nora said casually, as if an afterthought, "My father wants to know if you landed safely." "You can tell him yes," Jiamin said. "You could tell him yourself," Nora said. "I can give you his number." Silence. "Nora-tan," Jiamin said. "I'm just saying he's available," Nora said innocently. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Jiamin. I'll tell him you said you landed safely." The call ended. Jiamin sat in her apartment, smiling at her phone. 3 minutes later, she received a text from an unknown Singapore number. "Glad you landed safely." Jiamin stared at it, looked at the ceiling, then back at it. She typed, "Your daughter ratted you out immediately." The reply came fast. It was supposed to be subtle. "She's 7. Usually she's better than this." Jiamin laughed, put down her phone, then picked it up again. "How are you?" she wrote. This time the pause was longer, quieter than she expected. Jiamin read it twice, put down the phone, then picked it up again. "Nora says you looked at your phone a lot during dinner. I'm going to talk to Nora about information gathering protocols." Jiamin burst out laughing in her empty apartment. She typed, "She's gifted. Don't discourage her." Another pause. "She asked me tonight if Sembawang is far away." Jiamin's hand paused over the phone. "What did you tell her?" she wrote. "I told her it depends on whether you want to get there." Jiamin sat with that sentence for a long time. Outside her window, Sembawang did what it always did, quiet, dark, and completely itself. She had built her life here. She knew every sound. It had never seemed small to her. Tonight, it seemed to have limits. Video calls became a regular thing. They weren't officially fixed, or discussed, or agreed upon. They just started happening. Nora called with the punctuality of a 7-year-old who had decided this was now a permanent part of her life and accepted no further discussion about it. She called from her bedroom, from the garden of the bungalow, once memorably from under her desk during what she described as a very boring lesson, which she was sure Jiamin would agree didn't require her full attention. Jiamin had clamped a hand over her mouth and laughed silently as Nora whispered exactly why the history of Singapore her current teacher was teaching was a crime against the concept of interest. Julian would appear in the calls sometimes, not always, but sometimes. Nora would enter the room where he was sitting and simply not leave. And slowly, he became visible in the background, working, reading, occasionally looking up at the screen. With that quiet attention, Jiamin was learning to read more fluently than she had ever planned. Priya had opinions about all of it. "You have a scheduled video call with a Singapore Mafia family," Priya said one night, appearing uninvited at Jiamin's office door. "I have a standing call with Nora," Jiamin said without looking up from her work. "And it just so happens her father is there. He lives there, Priya." It was well past midnight when her phone rang. Not Nora's number, it was the other one. Jiamin watched it ring twice, then answered. "You're awake," Julian said. "You're calling," she said. A pause, the kind that hides something within. "I couldn't sleep." Jiamin slowly sat up. Outside, Sembawang did what it does at midnight. Crickets, a soft wind, a silence so large it was almost a sound. She didn't speak, letting him find for himself what had led him to call her directly that night, instead of letting Nora be the bridge as she usually did. "How are you?" he asked. A simple question, but not a simple way of asking it. "I'm good," she replied. "I made dinner tonight. In fact, Kai, my neighbor's son, came over, helped me with groceries, and stayed for a meal." Silence. "Who is Kai?" Julian said, not as a question, a fully formed statement. "A friend," Jiamin said, seeing where this was going. "A friend," he repeated. He actually cooks quite well. Made curry puffs from scratch." "And is there a man in your life?" Julian asked. Jiamin paused long enough. "Yes," she said. The silence that followed was not pleasant. "What's his full name?" Julian said. "Not. No, really, no." "Ah," she saw. Nothing reasonable, just the full name. Immediate, flat, as if he had already begun gathering information. "Kai," Jiamin said, letting it unfold. "Kai," he repeated slowly, as if filing it away somewhere. "How long? How long what? How long have you been with him?" His voice was quiet, perfectly calm. Somehow, that was more alarming than anger. Jiamin had spent enough time with this man to know his calmness was never empty. It was pressure with nowhere to go yet. "A while," she said. "A while," he repeated. Then nothing, just his breathing. She could feel him on the other side, not saying what he was thinking. And what he was thinking was very obvious. "Is he there?" Julian asked. "No, but he comes to see me." "He comes to your house, Jiamin. Why do you need to know?" "I need to know," he replied. Still calm, still controlled. But now there was something more, something with claws. "I need to know if there's a man walking into your house, cooking in your kitchen, sitting where I haven't sat yet. I need to know." Jiamin stared at the wall. "It's not reasonable for you to need to know," she said cautiously. "I know," he said. "I know it's not. I know I have no right to it. I know you owe me nothing and I haven't given you any reason for it." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, rougher. "I called you at midnight, Jiamin, on a Friday, because I couldn't be in this house for another hour without hearing your voice. That's where I am. That's what you've done to me." And he stopped. "I don't know what to do with that." Jiamin said nothing. "I don't share," he said softly. "I want you to know that. As bad as it sounds, as irrational as it is, I don't share, and I don't know how to wait. And I'm aware that I'm not being rational right now, but I called you at midnight on a Friday, so clearly, rationality has already left the building." "Julian," Jiamin said. "I'm coming to Sembawang," he said. Jiamin blinked. "What?" "4 weeks is too long," he said simply. "I'll come to see you." "You can't. I just travel for business regularly. Sembawang is a viable destination. You don't have business in Sembawang." "I could find some," he said. Perfectly calm, perfectly serious. "I'm resourceful." "Julian Tan, tell me there's no one," he said. Low, direct, almost desperate, under control. "Just tell me." "Kai is 14, Jiamin said. "He's my neighbor's son. He came over after school to help with groceries and stayed for dinner because his mother works late. There is no boyfriend." The sigh that came through the phone was long and completely unrestrained. The sound of a man letting go of something very heavy. 14, he said. 14, Jiamin confirmed. Another silence. "I was about to fly to Singapore," he said. "I know you were going to do that tonight." "I know. That would have been crazy," Jiamin said. "Yes." Then in a quieter voice, "I still want to." Silence. Then Jiamin asked softly, "What happened with your fiancée, the woman at the gala?" The silence on the other side of the phone changed completely. "She's gone," he said. I know she's gone, Jia-min said gently. I'm asking what happened, how you met her. What did you think you had? A long pause. Jia-min could feel him making a decision. 3 years ago, he said at last, at a charity event. She was everything. She seemed perfect from the outside, elegant, patient. His voice changed, becoming slightly flatter. I loved her, or I loved what I thought she was. When I understood they were different things. He paused. You know how it ended? Yes, Jia-min said softly. Silence settled between them. This time it was comfortable, the kind that didn't need to be filled. I looked up Sembawang today, Jia-min said. He blinked. What? The estate? The distance? The journey? A pause. 8 hours flight from Singapore. Julian, I've looked it up 4 times this week, she said simply, without drama. In case you decide not to come back, in case you think distance is the solution. Another pause. I want you to know, it's not. 8 hours is nothing. 21 hours flight to anywhere in the world is nothing. I want you to know that before you make any decisions about running away. Jia-min remained completely still in her Sembawang apartment. I'm not running away, she said softly. Good, he said. Then come back sooner. Not for Nora. For me. Come back for me. I don't like this distance. I don't like not knowing if you've eaten. I don't like someone else being in the same estate as you and I'm not. I don't like any of this. Julian Tan, Jia-min said softly. I know, he said. I know how that sounds. It sounds like you're in trouble, she said. A long pause. Yes, he said simply. I am. Jia-min stared at the ceiling, at the open laptop on the table, the flight tab still behind her work files. Singapore, in 4 weeks. Good night, Julian, she paused, as if he didn't want to be the one to end the conversation. Good night, Jia-min, he said at last. She ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. Then she turned the laptop and opened the flight tab. 4 weeks stared back at her. She changed it to 10 days, closed the laptop, and smiled at the ceiling. Priya was going to have opinions about this. She didn't care in the slightest. She told Nora on the next call. She had planned to act normal, mention it casually, keep it simple, carefully manage a 7-year-old's expectations. She said, I'm coming to visit in 10 days. And Nora shrieked. It wasn't a shriek of fear, but a shriek of joy, pure and unrestrained, completely undignified. The kind of sound that brought Julian Tan through the door in about 2 seconds. His sharp, watchful expression collapsed into something between relief and confusion when he saw Nora jumping on the bed. Jia-min is coming. Jia-min is coming. Jia-min is coming, Nora said. 10 days I heard, he said. He looked at the screen, looked at Jia-min trying not to laugh. Something moved on his face, warm and involuntary. It came and almost left again. Almost 10 days, he said. 10 days, Jia-min confirmed. They looked at each other across the screen between Singapore and Sembawang, while Nora bounced on the bed behind him, chanting Jia-min's name like a victory song. I'll have the guest room ready, he said. Thank you. A pause. Nora has already planned an itinerary for your visit. Of course she has. It's 15 pages. Jia-min bit her lip. She's thorough, he said. And there it was again, that involuntary warmth, quiet and real, the softness Jia-min suspected very few people in his world had ever seen up close. Jia-min watched this man across the screen, across the distance, and felt with absolute clarity what she hadn't been able to name since that hallway, that cut, and those hands softer than they had any right to be. 10 days isn't long, she said. He stared at her. No, he said. They're not. No one said what that meant. No one needed to. Behind him, Nora had stopped jumping and was watching the screen with the quiet concentration of a child who understood much more than anyone gave her credit for. She met Jia-min's gaze across the screen and smiled, a rare, sudden smile that transformed her entire face. Jia-min smiled back. 10 days isn't long, but Nora had only needed 4 minutes at a gala to change everything. Jia-min had learned the lesson of not underestimating short periods of time, and that was probably the lesson this story wanted to leave. That sometimes all it takes is a moment of bravery from a child to save a life. That kindness doesn't need a big reason. It just needs one person who can't look away once they've seen the truth. That love doesn't always come in the form of a confession. Sometimes it comes in the form of an umbrella offered in the rain, like 8 rooms someone quietly walked into, like a whispered sentence at midnight. I don't share, and that all children deserve to be chosen first, to be loved first, before anyone asks them to reciprocate that love. Some stories change you before you even realize they've begun. If you were Jiamin, would you change the flight or make him wait the full 4 weeks? Leave your answer in the comments below. We'd love to hear what your heart says. What in this story moved you in your real life? If you've been Nora or Jiamin or someone waiting to be chosen, if this story moved you even for a moment, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the heartwarming stories every day. We wish all of you watching good health, a happy life, and peaceful days ahead. Thank you for staying until the end. Goodbye. See you in the next video.